Hey, what's going on, guys? Today we'll be breaking down the NFC North schedule and making predictions on their win and loss totals. This on another episode of... So first up in the NFC North, we have the Chicago Bears. And week one, they get to host the Minnesota Vikings. Now, I think the Bears win this game. Minnesota will be starting basically a rookie quarterback in J.J. McCarthy, and I think just because their quarterback has actually seen an NFL game before, the Bears will come out on top. In week two, the Bears get to travel to play the Detroit Lions. I think the Lions win this game. The Bears playing in Detroit, I don't think match up very well against the Lions early in the season. In week three, the Bears get to host the Dallas Cowboys, and I think Dallas wins this game. In week four, the Chicago Bears get to travel to play the Las Vegas Raiders, and I think the Bears win here. The Bears offense should be perfectly capable of taking advantage of that Raiders defense, which I think is one of the worst in the league outside of Max Crosby. So the Bears should be able to just win based on the fact that the Raiders offense, I don't think, will be able to keep up with them. In week five, the Bears get their early bye week. And then in week six, the Bears get to travel to play the Washington Commanders. And off their bye week, rested up, I think the Bears will actually win here. In week seven, the Bears get to host the New Orleans Saints. And the Saints, if anyone remembers the NFC South video I did, I think they're one of the worst teams in the NFL this year. So, as no one should be surprised by, I think the Bears win this game. In week eight, the Bears get to travel to play the Baltimore Ravens. And I think the Ravens win this game. It's nothing against the Bears. I just fully believe the Ravens are the better team here. In week nine, the Bears get to travel to play the Cincinnati Bengals. And I think the Bears will win this game. The Bengals obviously have the better offense, but I think the Bears are a more well-rounded team. In week 10, the Bears get to host the New York Giants, and I think the Giants actually win this game. The Giants, despite what I think their record will be this year, have a very talented roster, and if the Giants had a slightly easier schedule, maybe they'd win more games, but I do think they win against the Bears here. In week 11, the Bears travel to play the Minnesota Vikings, and this time I think the Vikings win. The roster around J.J. McCarthy is very talented. I think with more time, as long as he isn't a flop, I think he actually can develop into a suitable starter in the Viking system. In week 12, the Chicago Bears get to host the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I think that's a win for the Bears. In week 13, the Chicago Bears get to travel to play the Philadelphia Eagles, and unfortunately the Bears are not ready to match up against the Eagles yet, so I think the Eagles win this game. In week 14, the Bears then get to travel to play the Packers at home, and I'm sorry Bears fans, but the Packers will still win at home against you. In week 15, the Bears get to host the Cleveland Browns, and congratulations Bears fans, you get to beat up on the hapless Cleveland Browns. In week 16, now here is where I give the Bears fans a little more credit, and I give them a win against the Packers at home. I think the Bears, with their improved O-line, their revamped weapons, and a head coach who actually knows what football actually is supposed to be in Ben Johnson, I think they actually get a win here against the Green Bay Packers. In week 17, the Bears get to travel out to San Francisco to play the 49ers, and I think the Bears win here too. And to finish out the season, in week 18, I have the Bears falling to the Detroit Lions at home to end their season. And with that being said, the Bears will end their 2025 season with a record of 9-8. Next up in the NFC North, we have the Minnesota Vikings. Now, the Minnesota Vikings, week one, they of course will be losing to the Chicago Bears because I just don't think J.J. McCarthy will be ready to play an NFL game week one. And in week two, I think the Minnesota Vikings lose to the Atlanta Falcons. Again, I think they'll put up a fight. I think the roster is very talented, but I don't think J.J. McCarthy will develop into a starter that can win games this early in the season just yet. But in week 3, I think the Vikings actually do win. The Bengals have a terrible defense, which is a great matchup for a essentially rookie quarterback like J.J. McCarthy, because he's not playing like the Pittsburgh Steelers or another great defense. He's playing the Bengals, who, depending on how Trey Hendrickson's contract extension talks go, could be holding out by this point still. In week 4, the Vikings get to travel to play the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I think this is another win for the Vikings. In week 5, the Vikings get to travel to play the Cleveland Browns, and that's another win for the Vikings in my book, because the Cleveland Browns will be a bad team this year. They have a lot of questions at quarterback, a lot of questions at running back, and I think just they'll be a bad team overall. In week 6, the Vikings get their bye, and in week 7, the Vikings get to face the Philadelphia Eagles at home, and I think they lose this game. Even though they're coming off their bye, I think the Eagles are not a juggernaut again this year, and unfortunately the Vikings will lose. In week 8, the Vikings get to travel to play the LA Chargers, and I think the Vikings will win this game. I don't think LA's offense has as many good playmakers as the Vikings, and by this point in the year, Kevin McConnell should have J.J. McCarthy actually performing decently well in that system, throwing to Jordan Addison, throwing to Justin Jefferson and T.J. Hawkinson. In week 9, the Vikings get to travel to play the Detroit Lions, and the Lions at home, coming off a bye week, that's going to be a win for the Lions. In week 10, the Minnesota Vikings get to host the Baltimore Ravens, and I think the Ravens will win this game. The Ravens in the regular season are extremely good, and the Vikings I don't think will match up well. In week 11, the Vikings get to host the Chicago Bears, and this time I think the Vikings get the win. The Chicago Bears got the win the first time, and I think they just split the series here. In week 12, the Vikings get to travel to play the Green Bay Packers. I think the Packers will win this game. The Packers at home, very good home field advantage there in Lambeau Field, and I think the Vikings will be at a disadvantage and thus lose. In week 13, the Vikings get to travel to play the Seattle Seahawks. This is the Sam Darnold revenge game, and I think the Seahawks win out in the Sam Darnold revenge game. In week 14, the Vikings get to host the Washington Commanders, and I think the Commanders win this game. The Vikings are just unfortunately going up against another NFC juggernaut here, and the Commanders should just be able to win outright. In week 15, the Vikings get to travel to play the Dallas Cowboys, and I think they win this game. Their defense has more talent on it than Dallas right now, and their offense does too, in my opinion. In week 16, the Vikings get to travel to play the New York Giants, and I think this is another win for the Vikings. The Giants just have a terribly rough schedule this year, and the Vikings in week 16 should be more than enough to win. In week 17, the Vikings get to host the Detroit Lions, and I think at home, they beat the Lions. And to finish out their season, the Minnesota Vikings will get to host the Green Bay Packers, and I think they split the series with the Packers, win in week 18, and end their season with a record of 9-8. Next up in the NFC North, we have the Detroit Lions. In week 1, the Lions get to travel to play the Green Bay Packers, and I think they lose this game. The Packers at home in Lambeau Field, I think, will be more than enough to beat the Lions. The Packers, of course, have a very good offense and a decently good defense. I think in week 1, where everything's still uncertain, I think the Packers have enough there to win. In week 2, the Lions get to host the Chicago Bears. I think they win this game. The Bears traveling to Detroit to play what is on paper the best team in their division. It should not end well for the Bears. In week 3, the Lions get to travel to play the Baltimore Ravens. I think the Ravens will win this game over the Lions. Lamar Jackson is one of the best quarterbacks in the league, and I think this early in the season, there's no reason to doubt him winning. In week 4, the Lions get to host the Cleveland Browns. I think the Lions will win this game. The Browns should not at all be a close matchup for the Detroit Lions. In week 5, the Lions get to travel to play the Cincinnati Bengals, and I think they win this one. The Bengals don't have a defense, and against an offense as talented as Detroit, that's an issue. In week 6, the Lions get to travel to play the Kansas City Chiefs, and I think the Lions win this game. The Chiefs have struggled with the Lions in the past, and I think this is no different. In week 7, the Lions get to host the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and I think they win this game. In week 8, the Lions get their bye week, and in week 9, the Lions get to host the Minnesota Vikings. Now, in this game, I think the Lions will win. They're coming off their bye week. They're at home. That's plenty of advantages already. In week 10, the Lions get to travel to play the Washington Commanders. And in a revenge game of their playoff embarrassment, I think the Lions lose. The Commanders, I think, just have a more talented quarterback who can win them these kind of games. In week 11, the Lions get to travel to play the Philadelphia Eagles. In an NFC matchup we all wanted to see last year in the playoffs, we get this year in the regular season. And I think the Lions will actually win in an upset. In week 12, the Lions get to host the New York Giants. I think this is an easy win. The Giants are just not as talented as Detroit. And in week 13, the Lions get to host the Packers. I think they'll split the series with the Packers and win here in week 13. In week 14, the Lions get to host the Dallas Cowboys. I think the Lions will actually win this game at home. I think the Cowboys, under a head coach who no one is certain how good he'll be, will likely not beat the Lions. In week 15, the Lions get to travel to LA to play the Rams, and I think the Rams will win this game against the Lions in SoFi. In week 16, the Lions get to host the Pittsburgh Steelers. This is just not a close matchup. The Steelers' offense doesn't compare very well to the Lions' offense, and while their defenses are more comparable, the offensive side of the ball will tell the story here. In week 17, the Lions get to travel to play the Minnesota Vikings, and I think the Vikings at home will win this game. And in week 18, the Lions get to travel to play the Bears, and I think they win this game. The Lions are just the better team than the Bears this year. No offense to Chicago, you've built a great roster. You'll be better as long as you continue to do what you keep doing, and maybe you'll surprise me and I'll be wrong on this one, but right now I don't see it happening. And with that being said, the Detroit Lions get to finish their 2025 season with a record of 12-5. And finishing up the NFC North, we have the Green Bay Packers. And in week 1, they get to host the Detroit Lions, which I think is a win for them. In week 2, the Packers then get to host the Washington Commanders, and that's a loss. The Commanders are just the more talented team. They have a better quarterback, better receivers. In week 3, the Packers get to travel to play the Cleveland Browns, and I think the Packers will win this game. They are definitely better than the Cleveland Browns. In week 4, the Packers then get to travel to play the Dallas Cowboys, and in Dallas, the Packers hand Jerry Jones a unwelcome present of a loss. In week 5, the Packers get to enjoy their bye week. And in week 6, the Packers get to host the Cincinnati Bengals. And I think the Bengals will actually win this game. Their offense is that talented, and I don't really see a reason to even consider the Packers being able to keep up with that Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins kind of production. In week 7, the Packers get to travel to play the Arizona Cardinals, and I think that's a win. In week 8, the Packers get to travel to Pittsburgh to play the Steelers, and I actually think the Steelers at home will win this game. I think the Steelers' defense is going to be excellent this year, and against the Packers, I can see their offense being just good enough to eke out a win. In week 9, the Packers get to host the Carolina Panthers. I think that's another win for the Packers. And in week 10, the Packers get to host the Philadelphia Eagles. This is the tush, push, ban, revenge game. The Eagles should be in very high spirits, very angry. They should play physical and thus beat the Packers. In Week 11, the Packers get to travel to play the New York Giants, and the Packers should be able to easily beat up on the Giants here and dish out some revenge on the Giants for allowing the Eagles to get Saquon Barkley. In Week 12, the Packers get to host the Minnesota Vikings. I think at home, that's a win for the Packers. In Week 13, the Packers get to travel to play the Detroit Lions. I think that's a win for the Lions at home. In Week 14, the Packers get to host the Chicago Bears, and at Lambeau Field, the streak of beating the Bears continues. In Week 15, the Packers get to travel to the Denver Broncos, and I don't think the Packers will win this game. The Broncos are one of the teams I think will be most improved in 2025. They already made the playoffs in 2024, but their roster looks a lot better in this upcoming season. In Week 16, the Packers get to travel to play the Chicago Bears, and upset alert, I think the Bears at home get the win. In Week 17, the Packers get to host the Baltimore Ravens, and I think the Ravens will win against the Packers. And to finish out their season, the Packers get to travel to play the Minnesota Vikings. And unfortunately for the Packers, I think the Vikings get the win here at home, making the Packers finish their season with a record of 8-9. So with that being said, guys, please like, share, subscribe, and comment down below. And feel free to argue with my picks, because as the previous videos I made have shown me, there's always one team that gets offended.